Hi, everyone. Today, me and Helevorn are going to be talking about her short story, Holmgang, which is part of the Tales of the North series that you can read on Tapas. Links in the description. So first of all, let's talk about your approach to writing short stories, Helevorn. Because previously on Tapas, you published a much longer novel called Lucky Wolf. What do you think is the difference between writing a short story like this one and something like Lucky Wolf, which is longer?
Hi, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, indeed, I used to write a lot more short stories in the past, but then I started to focus on longer pieces. And I would say that maybe the most important difference between short stories and novels is that you have to concentrate everything into a few pages. So you have to make sure that the reader can understand what your character is like and what your world is like, which is very important in something like historical fiction, where you have to do a lot of world building, even in the course of, I don't know, 5 pages. So because my short stories are not really independent, so I mostly use the same characters that I have in my longer pieces as well. So I try to detach myself a bit from the story and try to read it from the point of view of someone who doesn't know who those characters are and someone who is not familiar with the world and perhaps not really familiar with 10th century Scandinavia either. So often after I finish the story, I come back to it from this perspective and try to add little details that tell the character that tell the reader where the story takes place, because of course it's not a given. I have to mention perhaps during the story you will figure out that it happens in medieval Scandinavia, but of course I have to mention that right from the start. If I did write independent short stories, then I would not forget to do that. But sometimes I take it for granted so much that everything I write is in medieval Scandinavia that I might lose track of that. And so I always come back to it with this thing in mind. Um, and then the structure, of course, is very different because it's supposed to be more concentrated as well. And in a way, I have more freedom in terms of structure because I can structure it according to the type of story that it is, if it is action or slice of life or something surreal or philosophical. So I make my structure around that. In a novel, well, you choose a structure and then you have to pay attention to it for tens or hundreds of pages. This one is more dynamic. So in certain respects, it's more interesting to write short stories. And of course, it is a lot easier. It is a lot easier because it generally focuses on one event. So, and it has fewer characters to pay attention to. So, of course, it's a lot better to start writing with short prose than the longer pieces. The longer pieces start giving you headaches after a while to to figure out how to tile the scenes together in a way that makes sense and how to make the character arc. Here, you just show the characters in one event and start from there.
Mm-hmm. I see. Compared to Sons of Disobedience, is Lucky Wolf kind of in between Holmgang and Sons of Disobedience in terms of length? Is that why you would say Lucky Wolf was a bit easier to write than Sons of Disobedience, which is probably the longest work you have?
Yes, definitely. And the fact that I still have not finished Sons of Disobedience has proof that writing 300 plus page novel is not an easy venture. So yes, Lucky Wolf was a sweet spot. So I could focus on more scenes. I could have a more complex character arc and show character dynamics in a more complex way. But at the same time, I did not have all the storylines that gave me headaches in Sons of Disobedience. so, so yes, I just had two protagonists, and almost everything revolved around the interactions of these two people. So it was so much easier. So, yes, indeed, that was a
Mhm.
good.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the plot and style that you've used in Holmgang? What kind of tone were you aiming for when you first wrote it? And do you think anything has changed since that? Because I do recall that the first time you wrote the story was in 2016 around or so. But now I think you have rewritten some parts of it to post it on Tapas for 2020. What have you decided to change and why?
Oh yes, exactly. You are very correct. I did make this story in 2016 because that was when I decided that the characters from Sons of Disobedience could use some screen time on their own, and so I started writing one short story with each of the characters, whether main characters or secondary characters. And that was a very good way to realize that a lot of them were underdeveloped, and so they have improved so much ever since. Well, yes, with Holmgang, I will get to this in more detail to what I changed. But first, the plot and the style. This is, I think, my most plot driven piece of writing. It is an action story through and through, which I don't usually have. Of course, in my longer pieces, I have a lot of action scenes, but they don't predominate. But here, yes, it is perhaps the only story that I have that is an action story. So the perspective is omniscient, but I think it is a bit elliptical because I wanted to preserve a tone of mystery. So it is not that kind of story where an omniscient narrator is telling us what the characters are thinking about or what their past was. So I want the reader to figure it out in order to keep the mystery, because the protagonist is confused for the most part of the story. So I don't want the reader to know much more than he does at that point. And they want the reader to find out the gist of the story together with the protagonist. So, well, it is an action story, but of course, there is a lot of dialogue because I love writing character interactions and exploring dynamics between different types of people in different situations and characterizing them through the way they speak. But the plot simply revolves around Hakon, a 20 something Norseman visiting Iceland on business. And he's insulted by one of his business partners. And so Hakon provokes him to a duel in order to settle the matter, because it was, in fact, this is what Holmgang means. It means basically dueling someone for honor. It was a practice very often encountered in medieval Scandinavia. So the duel is the main part of the story. In style, it is definitely one of my more light-hearted stories with a little touch of humor, especially in the way in which the theme of heroism is illustrated, because heroism, meaning courage, honor, skill in battle, is a central tenet of Norse culture, and it is strongly reflected in saga literature, giving it an overly dramatic style and often far-fetched occurrences. And so I tried to poke fun at this a bit. And Hakon is, of course, the perfect character as the protagonist of such a story. Usually my stories tend to be on the serious side, but this is not as serious because an action piece, I could not take that too seriously.
So what kind of format did you choose to use for this story? Do you think your format informed the way that you wrote it, or do you think it really changed anything that you did in 2016? Because as I remember, your original story was not an illustrated story with as many pictures as the current version.
Oh yes, yes, that's right. That's right. And I don't even remember if I made any. Oh no, I think I did a couple of pencil drawings of the characters. Yeah, I remember that. But now I really wanted to make an illustrated story somewhere between a novel and a comic. So well, I could share my screen and show everyone a bit of what it looks like on tapas. So our listeners know what I'm talking about. Okay, just 1 second. Yes, so this is, I hope you can now see, this is my series on tapas. It is called Tales of the North because it is a collection of short stories. The one that I was talking about, where most of the characters from my novel, Sons of Disobedience, will have their own screen time. And this is Hakon's short story. So yeah, as you can see, this is the cover for the entire series. And then Holmgang is the first story, this one with Hakon. And so what I basically did is illustrate each page. So I made at least one illustration for each written page. It's basically a combination between a comic and a novel. And the main reason for that is because well, I'm a much better writer than I am an artist. At least this is what I hope. And so I wanted, um, I did not want to sacrifice the wording because often in a comic, I think that you are not supposed to have as much narration or descriptions. And I did not want to lose that because I'm not that good at drawing. I really admire people who can draw comics and who can illustrate so much, but I think I rely mostly on my words. And this is why I chose to do one illustration only. But I did not want to make walls of text either. So this was a sweet spot that I think is fitting for me. Um, so yeah,
Mm.
this is what I'm trying to do. It's mostly how I did with Lucky Wolf because there I also had one at least one illustration for each chapter, but here it's not a whole chapter, it's just a fragment of I don't know 3/4 of a page. This is what it would look like in Word, and yeah, so
I
shorter
see.
text, but yeah.
Do you think it's also easier to work with when you write with certain characters? For example, Hakon wasn't as big of a character as some of the other characters, for example, Ingvar or Aiden. So do you think using a short story format makes it easier for you to learn more about a character that is not as major?
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely after trying to write about him, and I did several stories, I mean at least two from his perspective, and I got to learn a lot more about him because in the novel he and also in Lucky Wolf, he makes certain appearances and certain scenes, but they usually have a certain function. So his function lies in the way he interacts with the point of view characters, with Aiden and with Ingvar. So I hadn't really made something stand alone for him to really show how he behaves in different situations and what he's like as his own person.
Hmm.
So it definitely helped me to develop him better.
Compared to any short stories you wrote for the bigger characters like Aiden and Ingvar, do you think it's easier to write about a more minor character like Hakon, or do you think it's easier to write about the characters you usually end up writing about, like Aiden and Eyolf and Ingvar?
Oh, I see. Um, well. it's definitely easier to write about my usual characters because I've grown to I well not really identify because we're very different people, but I've spent so much time in their head that it comes much more easily to me to write about them. But at the same time, um, it's fun because I get to discover a lot more about these minor characters, and then it really helps me to get back to Sons of Disobedience because I know so much more about them. So this story and also the next story, which I will post in Tales of the North, which will feature the one of the villains, we can say. It will be one of the villains from Sons of Disobedience will be the protagonist there, namely Oswald, as you know. So it was also really fun. That one was fantastic to to write about. But yeah, more about that story once I post it on Tapas.
What's following Holmgang? What's the short story that follows?
Yeah, it's definitely the slave and the trolls. And that will also be very different from this one. In tone, it will be very different. It's dark and it's surreal and it's perhaps I could name it fantasy. I don't know. I think it's one of the two pieces that I've ever written which involves fantasy or yeah supernatural uh, beings. So this will be very very different.
And whose perspective is it from?
The slave and the trolls. Yeah, it's well, it's mostly written in second person, if that makes sense, because the narrator is Oswald, the one of the villains, if I can call him that, one of the antagonists of Sons of Disobedience. So he will talk to an unnamed interlocutor and he will tell that person a story about a slave and some trolls. So it's very different, and this is what I wanted with Tales of the North. I wanted to alternate between different styles, different themes, and different tones. So I will alternate something as light-hearted as Holmgang with something as dark as The Slave and the Trolls, but at the same time, that is not devoid of humor either. So I think it is a good way to have that as a follow-up, because I also have short stories devoid humor. So yeah, like I said, I tend to do very serious stuff. So once we get to stories about Ingvar and Merwin, there will be no humor there.
Especially Ingvar, right? We know he has no sense of humor.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. So yeah, nobody's going to smile when I get to
No.
those stories. But the slave and the trolls, it's a bit dark, it's a bit sadistic, but there's also a lot of irony there as well. So yeah, it is a good follow-up to Holmgang.
How would you say the characters are like in Holmgang? As we know from previous sessions, on the podcast about Hakon, Hakon's a very straightforward, outgoing kind of guy. In what way would you say he is the typical Viking or Norse hero? How about Sif, who is the other main character in this short story? How do you think she differs from your other female characters?
Well, yeah. Like I said, Hakon is the perfect character to illustrate this theme of heroism in sagas, because I wanted to make him the typical action hero, the kind of a saga hero of whose adventures medieval audiences would enjoy hearing. And also the type of character that we see in action films nowadays. So he's dynamic, he's bold, he likes bravado, he's quite a ladies' man, and he's talkative and extroverted, he likes making jokes. So, of course, he's a character that cannot be taken too seriously. I mean, compare him to someone like Ingvar or Aiden or even Eyolf, because Eyolf, um, I think that one of the main differences between Eyolf and Hakon is that Hakon takes himself seriously, and this is why we cannot take him too seriously. Uh, so yeah, with Eyolf, it's sort of the other way around, because I think that it's like Eyolf is very flamboyant, and so the reader tends to think, oh, this guy, he's a clown. But then we start to see that he is he's using self ridicule, and then we start making fun of him once we realize that he's ridiculing himself.
Mm-hmm.
So with Hakon is the other way around. He does take himself seriously in a lot of ways, and this is why the audience cannot. Of course, there is a serious side to him. He's by no means a comic relief. Perhaps in some scenes, for instance, in Lucky Wolf, there is one scene where Hakon talks to Ingvar, and it's just the two of them. Well, yes, there we could say that Hakon is a comic relief, but only in that scene, because I wanted it to be a contrast between him and Ingvar. And it was a moment in the story where I wanted the reader to relax, because it happened after a lot of tense situations. But Hakon as a character is not, he can be serious. He does have a serious side. Um, he can be very caring and considerate, and he is a very friendly guy. So sometimes he manages to compensate for that. Um, I wouldn't really say childishness, but sometimes he can be quite oblivious to people's characters and personalities, and to what people want to say. But because he is so caring and considerate, and because he really wants to help people, he can compensate for that. So he can be serious, and he can be a very good listener, even if he doesn't really understand people. For instance, with Ingvar, where the problem is that Ingvar doesn't doesn't talk about himself, but Hakon genuinely supports him no matter what. So
Mm-hmm.
in these respects, he's not by no means a comic relief. And he has a dark side too, which I explored in another short story. Well, in the novel, I think that we can see all of his sides better, but in a shorter way, because he doesn't appear as many times, but there he's complexly portrayed. But in the short stories, I tend to focus on well, one short story shows one side of a character and so on. And yeah, so he can be a complex character. It's just that Holmgang will mainly show him as the action hero. He's a man of action. So I needed to poke a bit of fun at this hero trope, but being a protagonist, I couldn't poke too much fun at him. So I added these little ironies that the omniscient narrator just lets slip, we can say. So some of this humor comes from the contrast between what Hakon thinks and feels, and the way in which he uses bravado to mask his confusion in front of his male companions, because he's actually confused in the story. He doesn't really know what is going on. He's supposed to duel a man, and he has found out that that man doesn't only want to duel him, but he wants to kill him in the process, which was, of course, punishable by law. But the man is attempting to make it look like an accident. So, of course, he will realistically be very concerned about what is going to happen, about the duel. But he doesn't want to show that in front of his male companions, because each of the sides, each of the combatants were supposed to bring witnesses to the duel. So he has brought these men to pay witness to how he's going to defeat his adversary in battle. He cannot show himself confused. So I will quote here just a little fragment. In this state of confusion, he manages to say out loud, I quote, "It's a fine day to win a battle. I'd hate to miss the opportunity to put him to shame in front of this fine gathering." He cast a careless smirk towards the witnesses at their side. He had to. He was not called Hakon the Bold for nothing. So I could have just let this little taunt without adding the "he had to" part, but I needed to show the contrast. So he's not a shallow, mindless man who is not concerned about the battle. Of course he is. But he's just one who relies on the approval of his brothers in arms, right? Because this trust is the core of a warrior band, right?
Mm-hmm.
The trust that members place in one another, they get strength from one another. So without drawing the reader's attention to these little contrasts, it would have been like one of those action films where the fighters make jokes while fighting. So it would have been very unrealistic. If you are a professional fighter, why would you make jokes? You know that a battle is supposed to be taken seriously. You know that you are likely to die or be seriously injured. Why would you not be concerned? So, but well, it's not only Hollywood action films, but I think it comes from medieval literature, this trope, because in saga literature, which I used very heavily as inspiration, especially in this story. We often see this kind of situation where two warriors are fighting and one of them starts making a poem. And it's really funny because if we think about it, of course, it is completely unrealistic, but that is supposed to show that the ideal man of Norse society is supposed to be a very good warrior and also a poet. He is supposed to be wise and skilled in battle. And this is the explanation why someone is firing an arrow right at him. And so instead of ducking, he starts making a poem. So, of course, in a detached way, we can say that it's really stupid and unrealistic. But medieval literature, well, they have different standards than we have nowadays. And so um, this is one of the things that I chose not to borrow from saga literature because I know that it would read very awkward in our time. It would be like those action films where people make jokes. And I, of course, didn't want to make that. There is too much of that going around. But at the same time, Holmgang is my story the most rooted in saga literature because sagas are mainly action stories with a little bit of character building, so not enough for the story to veer towards psychological with moments of reflection or with symbolism, but just enough for the reader to understand the characters' personalities. And I think that this is exactly what I did here. Duels are also a plot that appear very often in sagas. Um, and well, if we were to compare sagas to other writings in medieval Western Europe, I think that well, another type of writing that is popular around 13th century, mainly in English and French literature, is the chivalric romance. And that is also plot oriented, but it has a lot of symbolism and spiritual themes and didacticism. It's supposed to have a moral. Sagas don't really have morals in that way or spirituality. They are proto-realistic so that they represent societal values and they are stories meant to be told orally for entertainment. So they don't want to have a higher purpose than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted Holmgang to reflect this, but at the same time I wanted to uh, correct, so to say, the things that would come off as very unrealistic, at least for the reason that they have been so heavily used,
Mm-hmm.
like people, like the example I gave, right,
Mm-hmm.
with people fighting and just randomly saying stuff. I had to give that up.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So how do you think the way that Hakon interacts with Sif really tells us more about his personality? And is it typical for a saga hero to interact with a female character like that? Or is it not typical? Is it one of the ways you're trying to subvert the tropes you see in saga literature?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, okay, so first of all, what it shows about his personality. I mentioned before that Hakon is a ladies' man, but I didn't really want to make him the kind of character who is so charming that simply every woman feels attracted to him and that he can have any woman he wants, but I rather wanted to make him a guy who is very impressionable when it comes to beautiful women. So I'm sure that his male companions don't really see him in that way. I think that they see that, oh, he's so cool. He's had so many women until now, and look how they all like him. But at the same time, if there is a woman who is beautiful and who is clever, she can just wrap him around her finger, and it's not very apparent because I don't think it usually gets to that. But well, Civ really does that. And Civ is, she is also an outgoing person, very much like him. I think they have a lot of things in common. And she also has, I mean, she's a lot better at interacting with people than Hakon is, because she's not as straightforward. She can be very cunning and very persuasive in order to get what she wants. And well, to summarize what happens in the story, they first meet and she pretends to be someone else than she actually is. And she manages to convince him that she is that person. And then when he realizes that she is not, he's naturally extremely confused. So he used to feel attracted to her because she's very pretty and she plays a damsel in distress. And he really falls for that kind of thing. But then he sort of feels threatened by her because he realizes that he is overwhelmed by whatever she is doing. And he realizes that she has a lot of power in that moment because she knows so much more about what is going on. And he knows just what she has told him. And he has no way to know if he is lying or not. So she really played him. Um, this is what I really liked about their interaction. It is very, very fun to write. Well, what you asked me about how typical Sif is as a character in sagas, well, she is and she isn't at the same time, because women in sagas are often portrayed as cunning. So, not all of them, but those female characters that sagas usually focus a lot on are those that have a silver tongue, so to speak. And well, this is not only that trope where the female character is the other, and so she's very hard to understand by the male character. It's not just that, because we have to remember that in Norse culture, it is very important to be wise, and that means to be good with words. So just like for the male hero, it's important to know how to suddenly make poems. It's the same for women. So it's presented as a good thing that they are so good with words. And even though sometimes they make a bit of chaos, but it's not meant to be a bad thing. And so I think it is a bit the same here. Um, so I tried to work with, I started from that, and then I made her, well, more more than the saga characters, the female characters in sagas.
I see. I think so. In many ways, she's like kind of like more deep, right? Because like you said, sagas are more of an action story. And I think for Hakon and Sif in your story, what we see is, a deeper exploration of their characters and their psyches, especially Sif, I think, because a lot of the things she says, we as the audience don't know what she's actually thinking either. So we're in Hakon's shoes, so to speak. We're basically waiting for the next update to see what she has actually planned because we don't really actually know what she has up her sleeve. And I think that's really, really awesome, like, because, that shows us not only is she a very clever person, but it also shows us that, Hakon is someone who is easily fooled, like you said, he's very straightforward and he never expected someone to talk to him like this and use him like this. And does he feel a little bit betrayed, do you think?
Well, yes, I think that he does, and this will be very apparent um, in the next parts of this story, the ones that I haven't posted yet, and it will be apparent in the way that the story ends. So yes, he does feel betrayed. Well, he certainly likes her. I mean, there's he cannot not like her, but at the same time, yes, he feels betrayed and he feels threatened. And I don't think he's really used to being threatened, especially by a woman. So yeah, and he's definitely overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah,
She's a
so
dangerous woman, yeah, because there was this part where I won't spoil it for the readers, but she tells him something and he is really shocked because he thinks that she may have harmed him and maybe he's going to die very soon. But then it turns out that she was like, "Oh no, that's not what actually happened."
oh yes,
Right?
exactly, yes. And this is interesting because this is one of the things that I added more recently. And it was, I mean, now when I edited the story for Tapas, and that was my main reason why I chose to do that was because um, I wanted her to be more persuasive in a way, because I felt like uh, the way in which Hakon is persuaded to help her was not very realistic. Her arguments were not really as convincing. I think that in the beginning, when she wants to get him to help her, she relies on his convictions, right? Because she plays a damsel in distress and she reveals that his opponent is actually a very bad guy. She expects him to do that to help her because it is the right thing. But then I realized that it is a mistake because well, people don't most often don't act from out of conviction. They act because they have a motivation to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the way in which I reconstructed some of the dialogue between them was for her to show him that he needs her, and a part of that is this fact where she reveals that she might have played a part in all of that, and that she knows so much that she can actually be dangerous. So she shows him, I have the power, you can help me, or if not, I can hurt you too if you
Mm-hmm.
don't. So it is in a way, well, she threatens him, I think, or not really threatens, but she shows him how much power she has as well. And this is one of the recent additions, like I said.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about the additions you've added in this year compared to the original version in 2016? And tell us a little bit more about why you decided to add certain things?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can actually share my screen again, so I can show you better. Yes. Okay, so the first fragment that I wanted to show you is a bit of world building. I think this is the main reason why I did that. So this is from the first part of the story where Hakon is swimming and he sees a creature that looks like a nykker, which is a sort of a mermaid, if we can say in Norse culture, so a water spirit. So I would read the old version. It was her lair, no doubt, a trap then. He rushed onto the rocky ground after her. But then, where the cave ended, she hid behind a rock and wrapped herself in a grey cloak that lay there. Confused, he came to her and grabbed her by the throat. Nycker, vile creature, you try to drown me with your wicked claws. I ought to break your neck, mounting your head as a trophy in my hall. And so I changed it. I said, it was her lair, no doubt, a trap then, he thought, but he decided to follow. What was a Drengr without boldness after all? He rushed after her in utter confusion. What sort of a knicker kept clothes in their lair? He was, however, a Drengr, and Drengr do not let offences against their life go unsettled, whether the offender be man, woman, or creature of the deeps. So Hakon did what any respectable Drengr would do. He grabbed her by the throat. Naked, vile creature, and then the rest is the same. And the reason why I made these changes is that first of all, I introduced the concept of a drenge, which mostly means hero. It is the ideal man in Norse society. And so in this way, I was sort of poking fun at this sort of concept because it makes the man do reckless things. This is at a point where they are swimming and he barely has any consciousness left because he has held his breath for so long, but he decides to follow her uh, in spite of this. And he does it because he wants to be a hero and he wants to be Hakon the Bold. So this kind of attitude pushes men to do reckless things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then in the old version, I just said confused. I did not explain exactly why he was confused. He was confused because she had clothes there, and he found it weird for a water creature to have clothes, and this is why I explained. And then I had him in the old version grab her by the throat, and I wanted to explain why he does that, because for the modern reader, it would be weird for a man to see a defenseless woman who is naked and to grab her by the throat. And, and so I explained it again in terms of that Drenger concept, right? So he would not let offenses against their life go unsettled, whether the offender be man, woman, or creature of the deeps. So it is what society expects the man to do, right? He is a respectable man, and a respectable Norseman would take a defenseless woman by the throat. So, of course, I'm using irony, and the irony is obvious to the modern reader, but at the same time, they understand his gesture a lot better. So this is one of the favorite fragments that I changed. And then again, uh, oh yeah, and I also wanted to poke fun at the fact that in saga literature, it is stated over and over how important it was for men to have beards. So there are it's funny, and I thought it would be a funny thing to show to modern readers, because there are sagas where there are heroes who are very skilled in battle and they have all the traits, but they do not have a beard, and the entire village is making fun of them for not having a beard. And so of course I made all my male characters here have great beards. And then I said, judging by the array of luxuriant beards adorning the cheeks and chins of the men present, it might have also been a beard competition instead of a sword fight, and only the sternest of judges could decide a winner. So, again, I wanted, by the use of irony, to draw the attention of the reader to this trope, to this Norse trope. And well, yeah, the last one, I think I already talked about this, about how I changed the story to make the arguments more realistic, and not have Siv rely on Hakon's conviction, and rather try to persuade him with more rational arguments.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. That was really a great look into your writing process, especially how much has changed from 2016 to 2020.
Oh yeah, it has. It has. It wasn't bad, I think, before. It wasn't one of the things that I cringe when I read because I also have a lot of those. But this was one of those that were okay. But at the same time, I worked quite a lot to change it. I think especially because it was kind of good, but a lot of things were missing, so I had to change it without really changing it. Yeah, I did put some work into editing this, but I enjoy editing. I
Hmm.
enjoy coming back to my stories periodically and altering things.
I think your edits have made it more metafictional in a way and a little bit more like aware for what the audience wants or wants to see. Like the irony and the descriptions and everything. I think a lot of it explains more to the viewer. And also kind of world builds more too, because we can get a better understanding of the society they're from and what kind of things are motivating Hakon and Sif.
Oh, exactly. This is what I was aiming for, and I'm really glad that you feel that the story has delivered in this respect because I think I took it too seriously at that time because Hawkwan was taking it seriously and he was the protagonist and he sort of dictated the tone of the story. But then reading it right now, I always have a lot of fun when I read saga literature. It was supposed, I mean, some parts were supposed to be serious, but I find them so funny that I find myself laughing out loud. And this was the same kind of thing that I felt when I read this story. I said, oh, look at how manly everyone is. This is so funny. And I wanted to convey that to the reader.
Hmm. I think you did really well.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you think it fits.
So I can't wait to see more of it. Is there only one part left, I think, as of the recording date today, which is November 21st, 2020?
Two parts.
Two parts. Yeah, we're nearly at the end.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And my edited version is quite a bit longer than the first one, so it would have been over sooner. Sorry. So yeah, it has. I arrived at the letter H, so yeah, we have two more chapters.
How long was it like in total? Like how many words was it originally and how many words is it now?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I really have no idea. I think it was like uh 4 or 5 pages long, and now it's about 9. So from
Whoa,
5 to 9,
wow.
it's almost. I think it's almost. I think. Oh, so I wrote about 3 pages extra. I think.
I
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
I think it was kind of rushed because there were so many things that were not clear to the reader. And not only not clear, but they did not really sink in, like the personalities that they had and the character arcs and what they were thinking. I really needed more space to show what they are
Hmm.
thinking without stating in the words of the omniscient narrator. So I had to really show that by their gestures and words and everything. So I really needed more space.
That makes sense. Yeah. Before, I think you just kind of threw it out there, but didn't really explain either, right? Just tried to get
Yeah.
the audience to kind of understand by themselves, which is, I think it's okay too, because it's definitely better to throw it out to the audience than basically have everything explained in the narration. Because, show,
Oh
not
yes,
tell, right? The rule of show, not tell. If you tell everything, but like, through the omniscient narrator, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, but you don't really show it either, right? Because some writers who are first starting out may have that issue, I think.
oh yeah, exactly, exactly, yes. Yes, and so I always tended to do the opposite, but at the same time I did too much of the opposite because you can explain things without stating them in a straightforward
Hmm.
manner, but you have to show these attitudes. You cannot skip them and expect the reader to understand, especially because, like I said, it is a short story, and you may expect that your reader is not familiar with the setting, not familiar with the characters. You cannot throw them out there and that's that. But at the same time, you cannot state them as they are. So yeah, they do need more work from this point of view.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing opportunity to learn more about what the behind the scenes for Holmgang and the other short stories. And I can't wait to learn more about other short stories we'll be discussing and sharing on Tapas.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. I really enjoyed talking about this.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right, goodbye.